More on Utah basketball. It's our Insiders series. We go inside the staff and kind of let you get to know some of the folks that are working behind the scenes. You might see them on the bench sometimes, but giving you a little insight to Utah basketball. And today, he's a man of mystery on the staff. His title is Special Assistant to the Head Coach, Justin Johnson, better known as JJ to anybody around the program. How are you?
Doing good. You?
I'm great. So.
Good.
What does the special assistant to the head coach entail?
I've been trying to figure that out for 4 years. I think usually what I tell people is I'm an extra set of eyes and an extra set of hands and an extra set of ears and all that stuff. I do a lot with video, so like I'll do our video coordination, making sure that coaches have practice every day, making sure game film is on coach's computer. So there's a lot with game film. But yeah. It's a good question.
You don't get on the staff unless you've got a relationship of some sort with the head coach. How far back do you and Craig go?
So I met Coach when I was 19 years old. I was a basketball player, and I say that in quotations because I couldn't dribble, couldn't shoot, couldn't pass. I could defend.
Set a screen.
Like I could, and yeah, and I was dirty. So that's like about the only way a guy like me can survive in college basketball. But I got a chance to walk on at a little NAIA school. Now it's a Division II called Minot State, right in the middle of North Dakota. My big brother was my hero. I was trying to be like him. He was a scholarship player at that school, and because the coaches knew him, they were familiar with me. So I got a chance to walk on there strictly because my brother was a basketball player there. Still remember Coach Dick Lemke, who is a Hall of Famer at Minot State. I randomly run into him at the Minot State Dome, and he just says, "Hey Johnson, what are you doing?" And I was a little bit nervous, as a kid would be, and I told him I was just working out and I was hoping to try out for the team, and he says to me, "Well, we have a JV, why don't you just come help us out this year?" And in my head, like fireworks are going off, because that was my dream. I wanted to play college basketball. He retired after my freshman year, and a guy named Mike Holtz became the head coach, and his assistant was Craig Smith.
Okay.
So that was Coach's first like full-time assistant gig in college basketball. He had been a GA at Northern State, where Coach Holtz came from, and still remember the first conversation I had with Coach. We were sitting down in Swain Hall, in the weight room of Swain Hall. And he just was asking about me and what was I going to school for. But I still remember connecting with him in that first conversation. And then I was never any good, so I got to be the scout team point guard.
Okay.
And he was always running the scout, so we got to build a relationship that way. And when I was done playing, I had approached those guys about being a student coach. And so I got my first year under my belt at Minot State University as a student coach with Coach Holtz and Coach Smith, and then a guy named Tim Miles, who was the head coach at
Nebraska, Colorado State,
and North Dakota State at that time.
Yeah.
So him and Coach had a lot of history together. They started their career together. Actually, Coach Smith's first, he was a volunteer assistant at Mayville State right out of college. Tim Miles was the head coach. Anyway, Miles hired him at North Dakota State. Coach says, "Hey, I think I could get you in as a student coach. Do you want to go to a couple extra years of college?" And I was like, "Yeah." Who wouldn't want to go to 2 more years of college? So I finished my undergraduate at North Dakota State as a student coach for Tim Miles. And then when Coach got his first head coaching job at Mayville State,
right.
I got to be his assistant coach. So we had 3 incredible years. We made it to 3 straight national tournaments. Won back-to-back conference championships in the regular season and the postseason. Ended up playing for a national championship in our 3rd year. And then Miles had gotten a job at Colorado State, and he calls Coach Smith up and he says, "I want you to come with." And so Coach takes his first Division I assistant gig, and I was 27 years old at the time, just in the right spot, the right time, and I got to be a head coach for 5 years at Mayville State.
But you haven't been with him all the way along, though. You took a little break from coaching, got out of it, did some other things. What brought you back?
So this is where racquetball comes into play, and this is where you're going to have to tell me to shut up. So I was a head coach for 5 years at Mayville State.
Okay.
We were never like fantastic, we weren't like great, and we were never terrible. We were just always kind of okay.
Yeah.
So after 5 years, that was it for me. Could have stayed in coaching, and I was just shot in a lot of different ways. Absolutely shot, burnt out, and I needed something different. And I had learned how to play from a very good friend of mine the year before my final year at Mayville State, where we would just jump in the court, you know, a few times a week and play.
Racquetball.
Yeah, racquetball. And it kind of made me feel like a college kid again. Like at one point, like I'm 5'7", I'm not very tall, but at one point I was 232 pounds. And I wasn't a bodybuilder, so I was not very healthy at that time in my life. And racquetball made me feel like a college kid again. Like I liked competing. I've always loved competing. So when I was done at Mayville State, had some chances to stay in coaching, but I decided not to. And there was a health club up in like a hop, skip, and a jump away from Mayville. And this health club, I happened to know a guy that knew the guy that taught me how to play racquetball. So through a couple different friendships, I get a job at this health club where I could get up at 5 in the morning. And by this point, I thought racquetball was pretty cool. Like he talked me into playing in my first tournament, which I didn't know they had racquetball tournaments. And so when I was done coaching, he said, you should play in a tournament. And I'll never forget, like I could talk to you for an hour about just that first tournament. I played a 12-year-old kid from Canada named Connor Medill, got my butt kicked by a 12-year-old. And I'm 31 at that time.
Good for the ego.
Yeah, some guys can't bounce back from that. You hear plenty of stories of first-time racquetball guys where they'll lose to like a kid, or they'll lose to somebody that probably doesn't look physically intimidating or something like that, and they just say, screw it, I'm done with racquetball. But I had a blast playing, and I immediately went over to see like the open players where there's no like limit on playing ability. You're playing against the best of the best in amateur racquetball. And when I saw these open guys hitting the ball and warming up, I just was like, man, I would like to be able to hit the ball like that. So took a job at this health club, and I would wake up and I would do a few push-ups every morning and get to the health club at like 5 in the morning. After I'd do a few push-ups, I would hit the ball all by myself. At noon, I would get back in the court and I would either play with my boss, Mike Orr, who is like another mentor for me, or I would just practice by myself, and then after work, there'd be guys hanging around. So for about 7 years, religiously, for about 3 to 4 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, for about 6-7 years, that's all I did, is I just lived racquetball. And I ended up, you know, I had all these goals, like I wanted to be like a pro. Like I wanted to be a pro after I got beat by that 12-year-old kid, and I was like a B player. Like in racquetball, there's D, C, B, A, elite, open, pro. And after I had been a B racquetball player, I was like, I want to play pro. You know, I started watching like highlight reels of all the best racquetball players that had ever lived. I was like, that's what I want to do. I'm going to play pro racquetball. So I put in all this time. I ended up eventually, I won the North Dakota Open Championship. That took, I think that was in my 4th year, after I had learned how to play, 4th or 5th year. And I'd always told myself, when you win the state championship, you're gonna go and play in a pro tournament. And so I won our state championship. I had a job at the time where I could sell a whole bunch and make a bunch of money a few months out of the year, and then that would feed my racquetball addiction. And so after I won the North Dakota State Championship, I fly to Los Angeles, California. I think it was either September or August of 2017. And you know, I'm a nobody, so I get matched up with a top 20 guy in my first round match, and he's ranked 17th on the International Racquetball Tour. So I go to LA and I beat the number 17 guy in the world. which was a big deal for me. And the whole time that I had been getting better at racquetball, I kept thinking to myself, I wish I would have known some of this stuff like when I was a young coach. Because at 27 years old, that's how old I was when I was a head coach. I really had no idea, I had an idea who I was and what was important to me, but I think a lot of times when you're a young coach, you're trying to be like this coach, or you're trying to be like this coach. And certainly,
you got to find your own voice.
Exactly, and I hadn't done that. And I hadn't found a lot of stuff in my life at 27. But the entire time that I'd learned some things about myself through racquetball, I just kept thinking, I wish I would have known this stuff back then. I wish I would have known this stuff back then. And I'd always stayed in touch with Coach Smith because he's been like a father, a friend, a mentor, all of that stuff combined. So I always stayed in touch with him. And at one point I had told him, hey, would you take me as a volunteer? He was the head coach at South Dakota. And we had kind of set it all up where my wife's a vet. She had found a job down close to Sioux Falls where she could get work. The guy that taught me how to play racquetball had a house halfway between Vermilion and Sioux Falls. So we were gonna make that happen. And he takes the Utah State job. And he said, hey, do you guys still wanna do it? Like if I can get you out here as a volunteer, do you still wanna do it? And with a 2-year-old kid, my wife and I said, screw it, let's go for it. Cause we're never gonna have a chance to do anything like this ever again. If we wait, it's no chance. So we packed up, moved to Logan, 3 years fly by there, 3 incredible years, and then here we are, today at Utah, gonna do the same thing that we did up at Utah State.
I think we have now found the most interesting man on the Utah coaching staff, and the most interesting title too, the special assistant to the head coach. JJ, thanks.
Thank you so much.